Hi, Skull here. So, I did a bad thing. I let curiosity get the better of me, and despite reading repeatedly how scary it is to let multiple fights string into one big fight, I went ahead and did it anyway. Oops. Before we get into the session, you might notice I've added some new tools to Foundry this session. We added a bunch of add-ons to both make running the game a little easier, but also to help you understand what's happening a little easier. Some of these add-ons include drag rulers that automatically show how far you travel and when you switch to a new action. Pathfinder 2e ranged combat that will make sure people reload their ranged weapons. A new UI that cleans up things like conditions and adds character art to roles, and the Pathfinder 2e workbench that allows us to automate loads of things like adding and removing the dying trait, automating moving people in initiative when they go down, lowering certain conditions at the end of their turn, and even reminders when people are attacking without a target. We also added animations to the game. One last bit of housekeeping. Sam was unfortunately unable to play this session, so Sesto is being controlled by Max today. But back to the session. When we left off, our heroes had just disturbed the Morlock scavengers in the servants' room, and we had rolled initiative. There was a lot to remember during this fight, and I did make a few errors, most of which were quickly corrected, but I'll try and point out when I've done something wrong. As this was a very long fight that took most of the session, refer back to the start of the video to understand why. I'm going to go into a bit more detail than usual. Otherwise, this video would only be like 10 minutes long. I'm also trying a new visual format for this video. If you have any opinions, good or bad, put them in the comments. I'm still trying to find my feet with these videos, see what works, see what doesn't. So any constructive criticism is greatly appreciated. May kicked us off. She entered her stoked flame stance and entered the room, opting to stay near the doorway as she had no vision. She launched some foxfire at one of the distant Morlocks, singeing the creature. Ornifex cast guidance on Rock, but was also nervous about entering the darkness, so chose to wait in the lit hallway. This is kind of how I expected this first turn to go, as with no dark vision and not wanting to waste turns pulling out torches, I doubted whether May and Ornifex would want to push into the room. The first of the Morlocks rushed towards Tiny, and then missed both its dagger strikes. I wanted to begin by blocking off this 10-foot entrance with swarming stance Morlocks, so that the group would all struggle to get in range and line of sight. The lack of light slowed our hero's advancement into the room, so things were going well towards this goal. Rock entered the room and critically stabbed the Morlock that was harassing Tiny. This left the Morlock with 1 HP. He then finished off with a second thrust of his rapier.
So I'll just give Tiny some scritches with my rapier just stuck in this guy, like probably pinned up against the wall. Just give him some scritches. Good boy. Good boy.
Okay.
Sesto's wrong. You are definitely a real wolf. You're not a fake wolf.
I should have applied blindness to the Morlocks as soon as Rock entered the room with his light source, but I forgot until after his turn. Ultimately, this didn't end up mattering as he killed the creature anyway. After the swift death of one of the Morlocks, I was feeling good about our hero's chances. One enemy was down and the group hadn't taken any damage yet. I did decide to abandon my plan to choke point them though, as clearly in a straight brawl our heroes had the advantage. Instead, I decided to fall back on their scuttling attack to hit and run, forcing our group to need to keep chasing them down. The next Morlock scavenger used scuttling attack to rush past Rock, swinging for him with his dagger as it retreated. The attack missed, but the Morlock still got the distance it wanted and then backed behind the wall for cover. It was during this one's turn that I finally remembered the blindness caused by bright light, so I applied it to the relevant Morlocks. It's a good job I did remember this, as the blindness and dazzled saved our heroes multiple times from crits this fight. Milo dropped his backpack onto the ground and then pushed into the room. Milo is currently encumbered while wearing his backpack, which is why this was necessary. The next Morlock took advantage of Milo being moved up to the front and scuttling attacked, running past and stabbing him in the gut. It then entered swarming stance with its friend to give them both a nice +1 to attacks. Sesto moved up slightly and boosted Tiny. Tiny then rushed towards one of the blinded Morlocks, bit into it, bloodying the creature. The next Morlock was already within reach of Tiny, so stabbed him in his hind leg. It then scuttling attacked into swarming stance with its ally. It tried to stab Tiny again as it moved, but failed to hit. Getting into swarming stance, though, meant that the next Morlock to act would get the advantage of the +1s to attack. It stabbed into Tiny twice, cutting away small amounts of hit points. It attempted to trip Tiny, but failed. By now, all the Morlocks had recovered from blindness, but would still be dazzled for the remainder of the fight. May rushed forwards and began swinging at the two Morlocks. Zoe has been struggling to get her head around the attack traits, especially those on her flashing sparks attacks. I've created a doc that details the most common attack traits, so after some discussion and explanation, she decided not to flurry of blows, but instead to attack one Morlock with a flashing sparks, and then attack the other in order to gain the benefit from the sweep trait. I think until this becomes more instinctual, it's going to be something that gets forgotten and needs to continually be reaffirmed as part of May's playstyle. I can see why some people would get overwhelmed with these kinds of rules. However, after all that, both attacks end up missing. Ornifex moved forward and tried to blast a Morlock with Divine Lance. Sadly, this attack also missed. After the great start our heroes had, I'd been expecting a pretty quick fight, but suddenly it seemed like the dice were against them. Rock restored some faith as he moved into flanking with May and stabbed into one of the swarming Morlock. The damage was pretty rough though, and his second stab missed. One of the northern Morlocks scuttling attacked, swinging for Milo, and ended up next to Ornifex. Its first attack went wide, but it did successfully stab Ornifex. I'm really enjoying the scuttling attack ability. It's great for keeping them mobile and essentially being able to attack whoever I want without having to let them be attacked back. Milo pursued the Morlock and attempted to feint, but a critical fail left him off guard instead. His following attack also failed to connect. By moving, he had left Ornifex open to a flank, which the next Morlock took advantage of. It scuttling striked into Ornifex's back, stabbing her twice and taking her below half hit points. Sesto shuffled closer as Tiny bitted a Morlock, blasting it with lightning. His following attacks missed, though. Of the 4 remaining Morlocks, 3 were heavily damaged, and while our heroes had been taking some hits, the fight seemed to be going very much in their favour at the moment. In hopes of taking advantage of the swarming strike and flanking, a Morlock scuttling attacked into a space next to Ornifex, trying and failing to stab May as it ran. It then stabbed into Ornifex, chipping away at her depleting health. This is another one of the errors I made. With the next Morlock, I did the same thing, scuttling attacked into swarming stance. However, it shouldn't have been able to join that square as there were already 2 Morlocks in that space and a third isn't allowed. It swung for Rock but missed, but it did hit Ornifex. Looking at the roll, it wouldn't have hit without the flanking, so this was technically an illegal hit. Sadly, I didn't notice this until much later when it was too late to wreck on the attack. May saw the danger Ornifex was in and rushed over to help. She flurried one of the Morlocks, very nearly killing it. I noticed at this point that our heroes had been spreading the damage around a lot. Obviously, in a combat with lots of creatures, it's hard to track what's already been hurt and what hasn't, so I feel like I should maybe come up with a way of making this clearer. Because May could have killed 2 Morlocks with those attacks, but instead she brought a third one to low health. That is still a good thing, but removing 2 enemies from the field would have been tactically better. Lastly, May attempted to recall knowledge on their weaknesses, but failed. Ornifex was very hurt after all the recent flanking attacks, so stepped back into the northern corridor, removing any opportunity for flanking. She took the step action as she wasn't sure if they had reactive strikes. She then cast heal on herself, bringing her health back to nearly full. Rock moved into the space Ornifex had just left to gain flanking with May. He then stabbed twice, killing 2 Morlocks that had been left at low health. This left us with 2 Morlocks alive, and I decided it was probably time for them to start running. Unfortunately, the next Morlock to act was pinned against the doors by Rock and Milo. He could have tried to tumble through, but instead I decided to reposition Rock. The roll succeeded, and he pulled Rock to the side. It then scuttling attacked, stabbing Milo as it ran by. This would have been a critical hit, but he was saved by the dazzled condition, as it failed to meet that flat check.
It zooms!
And it's gonna stab Milo in the fucking neck as he runs
Fuck
past.
you!
Oh, the dazzle
Fuck
saved
you!
you. This dazzle
Oh,
saved you.
Oh, nice,
Oh my
nice!
god.
Damn. Milo chose not to pursue yet. He instead moved deeper into the room and cast the light cantrip on himself. Sesto finally entered the room as Tiny gave chase to the fleeing Morlock. Without a light source, he could basically just look down this dark corridor. The last Morlock in the room scuttling attacked, swinging and missing as it ran by May. It redeemed itself, though, by critically stabbing Tiny, who was now blocking its escape route. May pincered the trapped Morlock with Tiny and knocked it unconscious with her non-lethal strikes. Not wanting to give chase alone, she held back for now. Ornifex was looking much healthier herself, so came back into the room. Unsure where the enemy was and what it was planning, she cast shield on herself and held her ground. Rock was brave enough to give chase and pushed into the corridor. He had a light spell on him and revealed the fleeing Morlock, but was unable to catch up. This is where my curiosity and evidently poor decision making skills kicked in. The Morlock had nearly made it to the room with its three allies, so realistically, the only logical choice would be to flee into the room for backup. But this is where Pathfinder's tight maths and roleplay butt heads a bit. Pathfinder assumes that you're starting each fight at nearly full health. Its encounters are built and balanced around that fact. But on the roleplay side of things, it often tells you when an enemy would retreat and where to. Often, this retreat compounds multiple fights into one another, causing two fights, each balanced around a group being mostly healthy, to become one much harder fight in which the party didn't get that healing time that the maths assumes they did. Now, I've read multiple times the risks of having fights spill over into multiple encounters, so yeah, I knew the risks. However, I looked at my group's health after Ornifex's heal spells, and they were looking alright. And I'm a sucker for immersive storytelling. There's no way this Morlock would stop running so close to its allies and just die for the sake of a meta concept of balance. So I took a chance on my party and had the Morlock act with realism in mind. It reached the doorway, opened it, and yelled for its allies to help. Three bigger, scarier Morlocks were added to the initiative, and part two of the battle began, and this one is where things got a little bit rough. Milo forced his way through the difficult terrain, scaling the cave-in. He pulled out his sling and sheathed his sword. Sesto used the Wand of Healing to recover from the crit he had taken and shuffled closer to the corridor. Tiny also backed up, giving space near the door. May moved up into the corridor and tried to shove the little Morlock scavenger, but failed. Not wanting to stand alone in the front line, she backed up behind Rock. The first of the larger Morlocks ran and leap attacked Rock. He was blinded as he rushed into the bright corridor, and his attack missed. He then backed up. Ornifex moved to gain vision down the corridor and then fired a needle dart that missed. The second larger Morlock leap attacked Rock. This time, the blindness saved him as the Morlock was unable to pass that flat check. Rock backed up, not wanting to stay alone against a tide of new Morlocks. He readied an action at the exit of the door to stab the first Morlock within range. The little Morlock opened a door, then scuttling attacked, missed May, and then retreated into the safety of that open room. A final, large Morlock rushed May, swung with its club, which missed, but it then did successfully bite into her. Milo cast light on May, giving her vision and blinding that last Morlock. He then loaded his sling, ready to attack next turn. Tiny tried and failed to demoralize a Morlock, while Sesto pushed up into the difficult terrain. Sesto also tried to demoralize and succeeded, frightening the Morlock. May flurried the frightened Morlock, dealing some good damage before backing out of the corridor, and hopefully luring the Morlocks out into the main space. The Morlocks rushed forwards, swinging for Ornifex. Rock held's action triggered, and he stabbed the incoming Morlock for a small amount of damage. The Morlock slammed its club into Ornifex and then tried to bite her, but failed due to the dazzled condition. Ornifex blasted the two Morlocks in the corridor with a haunting hymn. Both failed their checks and took some sonic damage. The Morlock at the back moved up into a swarming stance and then struck at Rock around the corner. Rock was saved from the first attack by Dazzled, but the incoming bite did hit. Rock was next and stepped down to negate the cover. He tried to trip the Morlock, but a critical failure led to Rock falling prone himself. Not wanting to give them any advantage, he used the rest of his turn to stand back up. He was now at least blocking the corridor, which stopped the Morlocks from flooding into the room. The Morlock scavenger scuttle attacked, swinging for Rock and then backing up behind his ally. Its attack did miss, though. The frightened Morlock couldn't reach anyone due to the pile-up in the corridor, so it just moved closer and then tried to demoralize Rock. Due to not sharing a language, this did fail. Marlowe tried to exploit vulnerability and succeeded, determining that they have no specific weakness. He then tried to fire a slingshot, but missed. There is a lot of missing going on this fight. A lot of failure. Probably added to how long the fight took. Sesto launched some flame at one of the front Morlocks, burning away some of its HP. Meanwhile, Tiny tried and failed to demoralize a Morlock. Sesto also tried and also failed this demoralize. May granted Rock a forbidding ward, protecting him from one of the large Morlocks. Then she backed up, advising the group does the same. Her plan was to let the Morlocks into the room so that everybody could reach them. It's a fair plan, as at the moment, only one or two of our heroes could actively fight the Morlocks. However, keeping them in the corridor was also helping them, as only one or two of the Morlocks could fight too. By backing up and letting them all in, it would also allow the Morlocks to fight freely. The Morlock that Rock was warded against swung for him. Rock nimble dodged, ensuring that the Morlock missed all of its attacks. Ornifex blasted the Morlock with a Divine Lance and then retreated next to May. I like Ornifex's turns, they're always nice and quick. The next Morlock laid into Rock with its club and teeth, chipping away at his health and leaving him very injured. Rock repositioned the Morlock, swinging him out of the room for his allies to assail. He then swung for the creature. He missed and decided to run back to his allies. The Morlock Scavenger was feeling more confident now that it had some stronger backup. Its scuttling attacked, running up to May and stabbing Tiny as it went by. It then bit at May, which could have been a critical hit if not for the dazzled condition. Remembering to apply the blindness and dazzled conditions seems really crucial to the balance of these creatures. There were multiple times when a nasty hit instead became a miss, and I genuinely think there might have been a few deaths on the table without it. The Morlocks began pushing one into the room. This one chased down Rock, slammed him with his club, reducing Rock to dying. It also swung for May but missed. Milo flung more sling bullets at the most wounded Morlock, some hitting and some missing. The Morlock remained on its feet though. Sesto took the opportunity given to him and scorched two of the Morlocks with Breathe Fire spell. One of them succeeded the save, and the other one critically succeeded, so a small amount of damage was dealt. Tiny was boosted and then bit into the wounded Morlock, bringing it very close to death. May assaulted the Scavenger with a flurry of blows. Her first attack missed, but the second hit. Thanks to the forceful trait, this means that the second attack dealt a little bit of extra damage. As I mentioned, Zoe has been struggling with the different traits on her various attacks. I created a quick trait reference doc, and while this has helped in some regards, it still isn't always clear which attacks are most effective. So I've also done this short write-up on when to use each attack. Flurry is more effective with a normal unarmed attack due to the agile trait. Flashing Sparks works better as two separate attacks against two different targets due to the sweep trait. I'm sure eventually this will become instinctual, but as of right now, it's still a lot to get your head around, especially in the middle of a big, long fight like this one. May then granted Ornifex a forbidding ward. The most wounded of the Morlocks attacked Tiny, hitting him with his club, and then it tried and failed to reposition Tiny. It ran up to his ally in the north of the room and swarming stanced. Ornifex cast Heal on Rock, bringing him back up with 16 hit points. Jem pecked the aggressive Morlock, killing it with her beak. I think this is her first beak kill, so that's cool. Wanting to back up its ally, the Morlock, still near the corridor, ran past Tiny and into a swarming stance with its fellow Morlock. It tried to avenge its dead friend, and a critical hit took Ornifex to dying too. It then tried to shove Rock, but failed. The Scavenger scuttling attacked May as it ran towards Milo. Another critical hit slipped by the Dazzled as it cut deep into May. It then lunged for Milo, but luckily this missed. Rock pulled himself to his feet and picked up his rapier. With his last action, he stabbed into the Morlock, but the damage was really low. The Morlock retaliated, hitting Rock back with his club. His other attacks missed, though. Milo swapped to his sword and swung for the Scavenger. He hit and left it on very few hit points. A second strike finally put the last of the initial Morlocks to rest. Sesto drank a potion to recover a small amount of health. Tiny ran in, flanking the bloodied Morlock and pounced it. He tried to follow up with a bite, but failed to finish it off. May moved over to Ornifex, fed her a potion, returning her to life. She then flurried the damaged Morlock, but both attacks missed. Ornifex stood up and pecked again. This attack missed, but a second beak attack hit, killing a second Morlock. With only one Morlock left, I decided to give our party the rest they desperately needed. So I had it flee towards its leader, hoping the party wouldn't try and pursue and extend the fight even further. Luckily, I was correct, and once the group had confirmed the Morlock was out of sight, we ended initiative, and everybody finally got a moment to breathe. The group executed the unconscious Morlock.
Does anyone have a knife?
I'll just stab it with my rapier. There's your knife.
That'll do. I'm gonna close its eyes because I feel bad. And I'm gonna loot the shit out of it.
Ornifex healed everybody that needed it, getting our heroes back to nearly full hit points, and removing the wounded condition from Rock and herself. While she did that, Milo picked up his dropped backpack, and then the group discussed the area.
Wonder what caused the cave in. Seems like these things have been down here a long time. They've been definitely hunting and eating something.
Yeah. Sure seems like it.
And like using what I know about upstairs, can I kind of figure out where this matches up with the upstairs flooring? Does it match up with the collapse of the foyer of the upstairs?
May determined that the cave-in matched up with the sinkhole on the floor above, and after some investigation, determined it was probably the staircase that had been blown up. With everybody rested, the group discussed whether to push on.
Do you want to keep going? There's plenty of doors we can go through, but we're all looking a bit worse for wear.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm feeling quite alright, but how are we looking on resources? As in our casters? How much magic you got left?
As I'm done patching everyone up, I will stand up and like pat the dirt off my clothes. I think I only have one heal left in me. And then I wiggle with the wand I still have, and I can still use this one. But that's it for now, sadly.
Alright.
So perhaps we continue, but plan to run if anything gets hairy.
Sounds
Yeah.
like a plan.
The group decided to cautiously head in the direction the Morlock fled in. They checked each of the servants' bedrooms as they passed, ensuring that there were no threats, and then entered the old office. They found the broken clockwork assistant. Milo attempted to remove the intricate gear, but damaged it, so it's only worth half of its initial price. May offered the broken assistant to Ornifex, but she declined.
I'm gonna pick it up and wiggle around a little bit. Hey, looks like Mr. Beak. I'm gonna wiggle at Ornifex. Does he want a friend?
I'm not
Isn't
gonna
it-
fix that thing.
Onifix will stare at it.
You can probably glue a beak to it.
She's obviously not into it, but doesn't say anything out of politeness. I think I'm fine.
I feel bad leaving him here.
We can
Maybe-
smash him, then
No! I'm gonna
You
put
can
him in my
take-
bag. I'm putting him in my bag. I'm gonna mumble to myself, you can sit next to my teapots on my table.
For some reason, completely beyond my understanding, Milo and Rock decided to open each door at the same moment. Luckily, there was nothing alive and hostile in these particular rooms, but if there had been, they would have just merged two fights. Again, the mind of the player is a truly incomprehensible thing. Rock opened the door to the washroom and noticed a small tunnel deeper in the caves. Meanwhile, Milo opened the door to the trapped hallway, and Ornifex noticed the traps beyond. She called this out quick enough to stop anyone entering. Deciding to first deal with the traps, Rock closed the door to the washroom, and the group began to deal with the 4 traps one by one. Trap 1. Rock tried to disarm the trap. He failed his thievery check, meaning the trap wasn't disarmed, but it also wasn't triggered. John asked if he could just try again, and so I said yes, but warned him that each failure would raise the DC. He tried again with a higher DC and succeeded. The first trap was successfully disarmed. Trap 2. Ornifex gave Rock guidance as he attempted the second disarm. He failed again, and this time he backed out and discussed triggering the trap from a distance. Milo decided to give it a go and moved up to the trap. He attempted to disarm the trap, but due to the ramping DC from repeated attempts, his roll was a critical failure and the trap was triggered. Shards of sharp metal, rusted weapons, and huge splinters fired into his body. However, the trap was technically dealt with now. Trap 3. Rock went in again to give the third trap a disarm attempt. Again, the trap triggered and Rock was also sprayed in sharp debris. This did just leave the final trap, though. Trap 4. Having decided that the disarm DC was now beyond them, they began throwing items and making attacks, trying to trigger the trap from a distance. After multiple failures, eventually Ornifex was able to trigger the trap with some needle darts, and thus all the traps were handled. Our heroes listened at the door and heard the sounds of hushed conversation in an unknown language. They decided to go in loud and thrust the door open, revealing Golgust sat upon his throne. 2 Morlocks, one being one that had escaped earlier, stood in the corner of the room. The Morlock leader began to speak to our heroes, but as the party realized they couldn't understand the language, we called the session. There was a lot of combat this session, and I for one have learnt my lesson about letting 2 fights combine. I think sometimes it will still be necessary to let this happen when it makes sense for the story. However, I might make some on-the-fly adjustments for balance, such as removing 1 or 2 combatants from the reinforcements. Despite their dire situation, our heroes handled themselves very well. They overcame an extreme difficulty fight with no casualties. They've begun to understand and utilize their attack traits properly, and they have displayed good tactical thinking. As for the adjustments to this floor, obviously I've bolstered the fights to account for 5 players. I've also hidden a beaten and bloodied boss Scrong. Our heroes told him to come back after a week, but they've taken longer than that to get to this point. As such, Boss Scrong has been captured and bullied by the Morlocks. If our heroes find him, who knows how he'll react? With the addition of the fled Morlock, the upcoming fight against Grawlgust might be really difficult. However, I'm going to keep to the book's advice that he doesn't get personally involved until either both Morlocks are dead or he gets attacked directly himself, and perhaps there won't even be a fight. The book doesn't give much advice on his goals, but if the party can figure out how to communicate and offer him something he wants, he might be willing to let them go. Thanks so much for watching. I hope the visual change was to your liking, but if not, please leave a comment telling me what you liked and or disliked about the changes. I'm still trying to find my feet with this series, so all advice is useful. I'll see you next time, and as always, have a great day.